Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into some of Barack Obama's most powerful speeches.
Okay.
And get this, our source material is literally just excerpts from his speeches,
Wow.
completely unfiltered.
That's fascinating. It's like going straight to the source,
Right.
to understand his journey, his impact,
Exactly.
and just how he connected with people through his words.
And we're not here to debate policy or anything like that. This is really about
Right.
understanding the man through his
Yeah.
own words.
Absolutely.
And honestly, even before he became president, his story is kind of wild when you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. His rise was meteoric, really.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2004, he wins his U.S. Senate seat
Right.
by the largest margin in Illinois history. That's not exactly a small feat.
No.
And then just 3 years later,
It's crazy.
he becomes the first African-American to be nominated for president by a major party.
It's mind-blowing how quickly he went from senator to the Oval Office. And then, of course, becoming the first black president. That's a whole other level of historical significance,
Of course.
But his presidency, I mean, it wasn't all sunshine and roses, was it?
Right.
It seemed like this constant push and pull between hope and this, deep division in the country.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you're talking about a time of immense hope for change.
Yeah.
But also a time when political and social divisions were really, really coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
Imagine stepping into the presidency during a massive recession.
Oh, my gosh.
While healthcare debates are raging.
Yeah.
And the world is in a constant state of flux. That was Obama's reality.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how much was happening back then.
Yeah.
And speaking of healthcare, we can't talk about Obama's legacy without diving into the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
It's been praised, it's been criticized, it's been challenged in court. It's undeniably a defining part of his presidency.
I mean, the ACA, or as it's often called, Obamacare, was a landmark piece of legislation.
Yeah.
Right. It was a complete overhaul of the American healthcare system.
Right.
Think about it. It passed without a single Republican vote.
Wow.
In either the House or the Senate.
Wow.
That's unheard of for something of this magnitude.
That's a really good point, and it makes you realize just how charged the political atmosphere was even back then.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still a hot topic today.
Absolutely.
It seems like every election cycle,
oh, yeah.
the ACA is back in the headlines.
For sure.
Yeah.
The ACA has faced countless challenges.
Right.
Legal battles, political opposition, public anxiety about its complexities.
Right.
It's a perfect example of how even the most significant achievements can be surrounded by controversy.
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate how hard it is to make, real lasting change,
Right.
even when you're in a position of power.
Yeah.
But you know what always struck me about Obama? It was his way with words.
Oh, absolutely.
He's been called a master communicator, and for good reason.
He was incredible
Right.
at connecting with people on a personal level,
Yes.
Like weaving in these powerful messages of hope, unity, and just taking responsibility for your actions.
Right, and it's like his speeches weren't just about policy, they were stories.
Exactly.
So when we look at the source material, these raw, unedited speeches, what are some of those recurring themes that really jump out at you? What messages did he keep coming back to?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones, and he often illustrated this through personal stories, was the importance of taking risks.
Okay.
He talked about his own path, like choosing to become a community organizer, even though people questioned his decision.
Right.
And he used that as a prime example of how embracing calculated risks can lead to real change.
That's such an important message,
Yeah.
especially today when it feels like playing it safe is often seen as the smart move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about being bold or taking those risks.
Yeah.
He also constantly emphasized the power of perseverance. Right.
He'd talk about his early experiences in community organizing,
Yeah.
where he faced constant setbacks,
Right.
and how those challenges really taught him the importance of resilience and learning from failure.
Yeah, it's like he was saying, you're going to stumble, you might even fall flat on your face, but you have to get back up and keep pushing forward.
Exactly.
What other big themes emerged from these speeches?
Well, one that really stands out, especially in our current political climate, is his emphasis on the absolute necessity of compromise.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the weight of that word, especially now.
Oh, for sure.
But what did he actually say about it, though?
Well, he was very honest about the fact that compromise is hard,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with deeply held beliefs.
Right.
But he argued that it's the foundation of a functional democracy.
Okay.
It's about finding common ground, even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
Especially in a country as diverse as the United States.
Yeah.
He believed it was the only way forward.
Yeah.
Did he ever give any, concrete examples of this in action, like how he actually applied this principle of compromise?
He did, especially when he spoke about healthcare.
Okay.
He talked about incorporating ideas from both sides of the aisle when crafting the ACA.
Interesting.
Attempting to create a system that was both workable
All right.
and broadly acceptable.
Yeah, it makes you think about those behind-closed-door negotiations.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to get people with vastly different viewpoints to agree on something as complex as healthcare.
And that ties into another major theme, right?
Okay.
This idea of shared responsibility.
Okay.
Obama constantly emphasized that we're all in this together.
Right.
He believed that tackling the big challenges, whether it's the economy, education, or healthcare, requires collective action, a shared sense of responsibility.
It wasn't just on the government's shoulders, it sounds like.
It wasn't just on the government, exactly.
He saw it as a call to action for citizens as well. It was about more than just casting a vote every few years. It was about actively shaping the country you want to live in.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of navigating a complex world, Obama's foreign policy was another arena where his leadership was really tested.
Oh, absolutely.
What were some of the defining moments or key decisions there?
Well, one of his core campaign promises, and something he talked about extensively, was ending the Iraq War.
Right.
He called it out as both unpopular and unproductive, and campaigned on a platform of change with ending that war as a top priority.
And how did that go? It couldn't have been easy to just,
Oh, it definitely.
extricate the U.S. from such a long and complicated conflict.
No, he did ultimately withdraw American troops, but he also had to navigate the incredibly complex task of maintaining some semblance of stability in the region while managing international relations.
Right.
He often spoke about that delicate balance he had to strike, ending the war responsibly while protecting American interests.
It's fascinating how this theme of responsibility pops up again, even in his foreign policy decisions.
Yeah.
It seems like he saw America's role on the world stage as being about more than just military might.
Right.
He seemed to be pushing for global leadership through diplomacy and cooperation as well.
You're spot on.
Right.
He believed in American leadership, but he also emphasized multilateralism.
Right.
Working with international partners whenever possible.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't afraid to use force when he felt it was absolutely necessary.
Right.
But he saw diplomacy and collaboration as equally important tools in the world of foreign policy.
And, of course, you can't talk about Obama's foreign policy without discussing his approach to fighting terrorism.
Absolutely.
Especially after inheriting this so-called war on terror.
Right. That was a defining element of his presidency.
Yeah.
He took a very different approach from his predecessor.
Okay.
Focusing on targeted actions against al-Qaeda.
Right.
And constantly stressing the importance of working with allies.
Which, of course, leads us to one of the most dramatic events of his presidency.
Right.
The operation that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden.
That was a pivotal moment, not just for his presidency, but for the entire country.
Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Mm-hmm.
What was it about that event and his response to it that felt so significant? That feels like a great place to pick up in part 2.
So we were talking about that pivotal moment, the operation that led to Osama bin Laden's death. When you think back on how Obama addressed the nation that night, what stands out to you?
Well, it was a defining moment, for sure. In his speeches, he talked about how capturing bin Laden was a significant victory in the fight against al-Qaeda.
Right.
But he also used it as an opportunity to reflect on the heavy cost of war.
He seemed to feel the weight of that decision so deeply.
Yeah.
Like when he talked about signing letters to families who'd lost loved ones in the line of duty.
Right.
Or looking into the eyes of wounded soldiers. It's just, that must have been incredibly powerful for him.
Oh, absolutely. And difficult.
And difficult, yeah. It clearly weighed heavily on him.
Yeah.
And, he acknowledged the sacrifices made by service members and their families time and time again.
Yeah.
Emphasizing that America's commitment to fighting terrorism wasn't about vengeance.
Right.
It was about protecting its citizens and its allies.
He never glorified war, did he?
Yeah.
Even when talking about a victory like this,
Yeah.
he framed it as like this necessary action, not a reason to celebrate.
Exactly. And that ties back into his broader message about responsible leadership, right?
Right.
He believed in American strength, but but he also believed that strength had to be paired with restraint
Right.
and a deep understanding of the very real consequences of military action.
Which makes sense given his commitment to diplomacy and international cooperation.
Yeah.
He always seemed to be pushing for more dialogue, more understanding between different cultures and nations.
You're absolutely right. He saw diplomacy as this essential tool for preventing conflict and creating a more stable world. He spoke at length about the need to engage with other nations, even those with vastly different values or systems of government.
Right.
He firmly believed that isolationism wasn't the answer, and that America had a responsibility to lead,
Yeah.
but also to listen and learn from others.
That message feels incredibly relevant today, with all the talk about global interconnectedness and the challenges facing the international community as a whole.
Absolutely.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about Obama's overarching message to the American people.
Okay.
What were the key takeaways he seemed to emphasize over and over?
Well, I think one of the most powerful and enduring elements of his message was this unwavering belief in the power of citizenship.
Okay.
He talked about it constantly.
Like voting?
Well, he talked about voting, but it was bigger than that.
Okay.
It was this idea that democracy isn't a spectator sport.
Okay.
It requires active participation from each and every citizen.
He wasn't just talking about voting, though, right? It felt like he was talking about something much deeper, something more fundamental to what it means to be an American.
Absolutely. He was talking about civic engagement in all its forms. He challenged people to do more than just vote, to engage in civil discourse, advocate for the change they wanted to see, and hold elected officials accountable.
Right. Be engaged.
Yeah, he saw citizenship as an ongoing responsibility.
Not just something you check off a box. All right.
Exactly, not a box you tick every few years.
Right.
He wanted people to stay informed, speak their minds, get involved in their communities.
Right.
He truly believed that was the essence of a healthy democracy.
And he saw it as the foundation
He did.
upon which everything else is built.
Absolutely.
A government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Lincoln said.
Exactly, exactly.
And he had this deep, abiding faith in the collective power of the American people to make progress, overcome challenges, and create a more just and equitable society.
He did. He really did.
You can really feel that optimism in his speeches.
Oh, yeah.
This unwavering belief in America's potential, even in the face of so much division and adversity.
Yeah, yeah.
He seemed to believe that things could get better, that progress was possible if people were willing to put in the work. Together.
Together, that's the key.
Right.
And he often used his own life story as an example.
Right.
The son of a single mother reaching the highest office in the land as proof that, in America, anything is possible.
It's a powerful narrative for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that faith in we being a recurring theme.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, it's woven throughout his speeches. He used examples like his Yes We Can campaign slogan.
Right. It's so effective.
And his constant calls for unity.
Yeah.
Especially when addressing divisive issues like political polarization or social unrest.
It's almost like he saw that sense of collective purpose,
Yeah.
that belief in we the people,
Yeah.
as the antidote to the cynicism and division that can creep into our national dialogue.
That's a very astute observation. He understood that democracy thrives on a shared sense of purpose, a belief that we're all in this together, working towards a common goal. And he used his words, his rhetoric, to try to inspire that sense of unity, to remind people that despite their differences, they were all Americans, bound by a common destiny.
And that message, it feels just as relevant today as it was during his presidency.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe even more so.
Maybe even more so.
Yeah.
Now, we're starting to run out of time, but I wanted to touch on one more thing before we move on. He often spoke about the importance of leaving a better world for future generations.
Right.
What did he mean by that?
You're right. That theme of legacy, of responsibility to future generations, it definitely comes up a lot in his speeches, particularly those he delivered later in his presidency.
Did he ever go into detail about what that meant to him? This idea of a better world, what did that look like?
He did. He spoke about things like combating climate change, promoting peace and security around the world, expanding opportunity for all, and upholding democratic values. He saw these as the cornerstones of a more just and sustainable future.
It sounds like he believed that progress isn't a destination, it's an ongoing process.
Yes.
That demands constant effort and vigilance.
Precisely. He often said that the work of building a better world is never truly finished.
Right.
That each generation has a responsibility to carry the torch forward, to address the challenges of their time, and to leave a more just and equitable world for those who come after.
It's a powerful message, a call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
There.
It's a question worth asking, and more importantly, a question worth acting on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the words of Barack Obama.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Love what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with others. Your support fuels the journey for more awesome content.